Paul, thank you so much for joining us on the week you unveil your new tax plan. So it involves a little bit of flat tax, a little bit of fair tax. Personally, I think it's a great idea, loving it. Tell us about the 14% rate on income and also very specifically, no payroll taxes?
You know, our tax code has been chasing companies and jobs overseas for years now. We chase Burger King to Canada. We keep chasing companies that are reincorporating overseas. Some of America's greatest companies won't bring their money back because of our tax code. So we just decided to get rid of the entire tax code and start over with a 14.5% rate. This would be a 14.5% business tax and a 14.5% personal income tax, and everybody would pay it. It would be different than the current system where some corporations and some individuals file tax returns that are tens of thousands of pages long in order to avoid paying any taxes. Under our system, everybody would pay 14.5%. But the interesting thing that no one's ever tried before is we get rid of the payroll tax. So every working class American in our country will no longer pay payroll tax. It'll be part of the business tax. And this will be great for those who are, you know, just struggling to get by, making $30,000, $40,000 a year with a whole family to feed.
All right.
So this will be a great tax code or a tax cut for the working class.
Very interesting. I've been a big in favor of the fair tax for a long time, and I think this incorporates some of the good parts of it. But I have to ask you this, Senator. How do you fund the social programs if there's no FICA tax?
What we do is it comes out of the business tax, so business will pay the payroll tax. They will be taxed on their payroll, and that's different than what we do now. But it's, I think, a trade that's worth taking, where the worker no longer has to pay the tax, the business pays it. So the money will go into a fund, and we will dictate out of our plan that the first money has to fully fund Social Security, fully fund Medicare. So in some ways, this is an advantage over the current system, which actually doesn't fully fund. Our system will fully fund Social Security and Medicare, and then what will have to happen is if the rest of the government will have to say, you know what, we have to cut back in order to make ends meet, that will have to happen.
Right. So, and very importantly, so have you scored this? Do you know how much this is going to cost? In other words, tax revenues, tax receipts by the government. Will this drop tax receipts going into the government?
This will be the largest tax our history, and we want to argue that that's a good thing, because really you want to argue, where are jobs created? Are they created if we send $3 trillion to Washington? Or are they better created if $3 trillion stays in the private economy? We haven't had that distinct sort of argument or distinct debate in our country over where money is best spent and where jobs are best created. The Tax Foundation looked at our plan and said that we create a couple million jobs. And so I'm excited about having that argument with Hillary Clinton. If she wants to argue that every worker in America should be paying a couple $1,000s in payroll tax, and I want to argue that everybody making $30,000, $40,000 a year should have a couple extra $1,000s in their paycheck that they can spend on them and their families and on saving, I think we can have that argument. I'm happy to have that argument with Hillary Clinton.
Sure. And because it's a tax cut, will there be the necessary spending cut, or will that go to debt?
Yeah, I've spent my whole 5 years that I've been in the Senate balancing budgets and putting forth budgets that balance. So I am willing to do the spending cuts. I'm not willing to add to the debt. And so while this is a significant tax cut, it causes a lot of growth, which means over time tax revenue will pick up from growth. But in the meantime, I'll cut spending. You know, there's several departments up here we could do without, and you wouldn't notice the difference. I think if we got rid of the Department of Education, I don't think you'd notice the difference. Since we've had it for 30 years, our scores aren't improved, and really in some ways we've taken power away from parents and teachers. I'd like to return that power to the states and to the people, and I think there's a lot of Republicans who agree with me on that.
Senator, let me turn to the 2016 race. A couple of new hats in the ring, so to speak. Donald Trump earlier in the week declared that he's going to run for president, and Jeb Bush also jumped in the ring. On Donald Trump, he had some provocative things to say. I'm going to run a little soundbite, get you to react to that. Listen.
I will be the greatest jobs president that God ever created. I tell you that.
Now, love him or hate him, Donald Trump seems to be making the GOP field stronger and at least more prepared. Is that accurate?
Well, I think he taps into a vein of distrust of career politicians. It's the same thing I think I tapped into when I ran as a physician, not as a politician for office. And I think he knows what people want. They do want the creation of jobs, and they want something different. And so the question is, what will be his plan for creating jobs? My plan is to dramatically lower taxes, to dramatically simplify the tax code, in fact, to throw out the tax code. So that's the question. Voters will have to compare which plan will work better to create jobs, and we'll see.
And so you think it's a good thing or a bad thing to be standing on the same debate stage with Donald Trump?
You know, I think the more the merrier. And I think one thing that's wrong with politics is we have too many politicians involved. So it might be interesting to have people in the debates who will say what they think and not be cagey about it. Doesn't mean we'll agree on every issue, but the thing is that I think we need more truth tellers. We need more people who will speak up and say, you know what, the politicians, the status quo isn't working in Washington. We need to do something different. And on that vein, I think he and I are on the same wavelength, that the status quo and all the career politicians ought to go. I'm a big fan in term limits, and so I think there are new people that could come into government that could do just as good a job or better than what we have.
Senator, one of the other things Donald Trump said, Mr. Trump said during his speech, was that there's some of the front runners. He specifically pointed the finger at Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, et cetera, but he also called the group fools. Care to weigh in on that?
Well, you know, I don't know about what descriptor we should use. I would say that there are certain impediments that many of them will have to overcome. Some say Jeb Bush will be the front runner when he has the buckets of money that he's going to raise. But I think he has some obstacles to overcome, because I think there's a lot of Republicans who don't want a big government Republican, who truly want a conservative. And many Republicans, like myself, have been part of the party and the movement for a long time that says that education should be sent back to the states and the people and not concentrated in the federal government. I think that's an important debate, and we'll have that debate. But I don't think Common Core and centralizing control of education and the Department of Education is going to be very popular in our party.
Senator, before I lose you, Real Clear Politics, the latest average has you absolutely the strongest on the GOP side in a head-to-head against Hillary Clinton. Can you tell us how that turns out, how you think you got there?
We're pretty excited by the fact that we're actually beating Hillary Clinton in 5 states that President Obama won. The way you win presidential elections is not by winning the red states or the Republican states. It's by winning the purple states, or the states that went for the opposite party. We think we're beating Hillary Clinton in Pennsylvania and Ohio and other states like this because we attract independents. In fact, the polls show that we're beating Hillary Clinton by 8 to 10 points among independents. And I think it's because I talk about liberty issues, the right to privacy, the right to, be left alone. And I think a lot of Americans resonate with that. They think the president went too far in collecting all of our phone records. And so I think a lot of people will be and are becoming attracted to this idea that government ought to leave us alone.
All right, Senator, we're going to say thank you very much, and a very, very interesting tax plan. I think that's what more candidates need to do, is start opening up and telling us what they plan to do with taxes specifically, because that affects every one of the folks watching right now. Senator, thank you so much.
Thank you.